Hello everyone, this is our final history or his story video coming to you from a different location. So yeah, today is our final video of the year. I'm sure you guys are tired of seeing my face, so we're gonna finish with this one and then you guys can enjoy your summer and you don't have to see me anymore. I hope you just kidding. I hope you enjoyed hearing all of these history or his stories. Remember, if you like the pod or like what I'm telling you about, you can go and listen to the podcast. It actually worked out that the plan originally was they were going to have 30 episodes, but it was a contest, and so one of them won today. And so because of that, there's not a 30th episode, so we are ending on the season finale with them. And if you really like them, they're coming back, I think, like late June, July, somewhere in there. So if you enjoy hearing these, you can always go online and listen to their podcast. It's on Spotify. It's on Apple is where I always get mine. But they are available on Spotify. I've listened there too. And I'm sure you can find them other places. I just don't know where those places are. So yeah, and I love their stories. Like I said, the Titanic one is probably my favorite just because it's the first one. But so today we're going to do Paranormal Activity again. If you are like, have a weak stomach, this might not be quite for you. One of the stories is kind of gross. But yeah, so that's kind of where we're at. So, but again, warning, one of them is gross. So this is Paranormal Activity. You know, things that can't be explained, that kind of thing. So, and here are the story titles. Number 1, Rhode Island creates vampire medicine. Number 2, Warren G. Harding's ghost mistress. And John Glenn sees firefly aliens. That's story number 3. So we are going to start right away. I'm not going to waste a ton of time. Just, you know, we'll get started. And here we go. So story number 1, Rhode Island creates vampire medicine. So this story takes place in the 1880s. It was actually kind of during a time of a pandemic, which is kind of interesting. But they were fighting at this time tuberculosis. They called it consumption. So if you're reading something and it says consumption, it's the same thing as tuberculosis. There's no cure for tuberculosis at this time. And they really didn't know what it was. It affects your lungs. And so they really weren't sure what it was. So the thing was, it was in localized areas. So multiple people at once would get it, especially within a household. That was very common. And this story takes place, sorry, I have allergies. I am not sick, I promise. It's just allergies. So, and it takes place in Exeter, Rhode Island. There's a family, the Brown family. George and Mary Brown were the parents, and Mary Brown had tuberculosis. The oldest daughter, Mary Olive, also gets it in 1886. So, they both are sick with it. Then in 1891, their son Edwin and their youngest daughter Mercy both end up with tuberculosis. So everyone in the family but the dad, George, ends up with tuberculosis. A lot of people in the area, this is very common back then, thought the family was cursed, especially if there's multiple deaths in the family. They think there's, you know, a ghost or some undead activity that's maybe haunting the family and infecting them. And so that's kind of what a lot of people in the area think. The mom, Mary, and her oldest daughter, Mary Olive, die. And they believed whoever died then comes back and kind of gets the others sick. And so they think that's what happened in this family. Then Mercy dies, and this is in January of 1892. So she survives quite a while after her mom and her sister. And the thing about tuberculosis is some people lived quite a long time with it. It just kind of depended on your immune system and that kind of thing. So, so this town says we need to do something. Something's obviously happening to make this whole family sick. They don't want other people to get sick. And so what they do is they decide we need to dig up the bodies. This is where, I'm sorry, it gets a little gross. You could skip a little if you want. Although this part's important to the story. I'm so sorry. I'm gonna like turn it down a little bit. So in March, so she was buried in January. Mercy was the last one. They start digging them up and they're like, maybe we can find a cure to tuberculosis, or consumption is what they called it. So Mary and the oldest daughter, they dig up, Mary Olive, and they're both decomposed. You can't do anything with that. And so then they decide to dig up the last one, Mercy. It's only been 2 months since she died, and she has not decomposed at all. in 2 months. And they actually find, blood, like, in her body, when they dig her up. And so they believe that Mercy must be a vampire. And they don't actually call her a vampire. I don't know if they even had that term quite yet. They don't call her that, but that's pretty much what they're thinking she is. And she's coming out at night, and she is possibly infecting other people. And so what they do is they think this is the fix. They take her heart and some of her other organs, and they combine them, and they add some water, and they make like a tonic because they think it will cure her brother. I'm sorry. So her brother has to drink this tonic nastiness, because they think it's going to cure him. Now, obviously, he dies. He dies 2 months later in May. This is not a cure. This is disgusting. And so he dies 2 months later in May. We do know now, and science says, that Mercy died in January. And in that January, it was very cold, like super cold. And so they couldn't bury her underground because the ground was so hard. And so what they did is they ended up burying her in like a stone, I can't remember what they're called, but anyway, like a coffin above ground. So it was pretty much like a refrigerator. So her body didn't decompose because it was so cold. So, yeah, that is why, not because she was coming out at night and infecting people. Now, another kind of cool little tidbit about it is there was the author Bram Stoker. He wrote the story Dracula, like right around 1900, and he based part of his story. There was a girl in there. I think she was like 19 in the story. And she was based off of Mercy, they believe, because he had heard this story, and decided to base part of that story off of her. So, sorry, disgusting, but that's story number 1. Rhode Island creates vampire medicine. All right, on to story number 2. This is Warren G. Harding's Ghost. So, first of all, this is just random trivia. Did you know his middle name is Gamaliel? Yeah, random. He's the 29th president. He only served 2 years, though, because he died in 1923. This is obviously right after World War I, and so he's all about a return to normalcy, kind of fixing our country. But there were a lot of scandals during his presidency. One of them was the Teapot Dome scandal. We're actually not going to get into that, but yeah, a lot of scandals and that kind of stuff. He is known for cheating on his wife, and what he did is he paid money to keep the women quiet that he had affairs with. He was elected in the year 1920, and he's known for cheating on his wife a lot. Again, disclaimer, not the best story either. So there were 2 different women that he was assumed to have affairs with. One is Carrie Phillips, that's his wife's best friend, unfortunately, and Nan Britton. So he's a horrible guy. So he actually paid these women to keep quiet, and the Republican National Convention also paid money to Carrie Phillips, the first woman, $5,000 a month to keep her quiet. Now, first of all, the Republican National Convention's involved, because they didn't want this to come back on them. They wanted Republicans obviously elected. And yeah, so they pay $5,000 a month to keep her quiet. You would think the other woman would get the same amount of money, but instead she ends up with a daughter, and $500 a month. So I don't know why one gets 5,000, one gets 500. That's kind of irritating. Harding always said it was not his daughter. But they do dig up his body 90 years after he died, and they do a DNA test and find that he actually was the father. He never claimed her. And the sad part is that, so he died in 1923. Nan dies, though, this woman who he had a daughter with, died in 1922 of polio. And so his daughter, who he never claimed, was obviously put in an orphanage. She was eventually adopted, and they did give money for her until... So it's like he didn't claim her, but yet they were giving money. They gave money until he died in 1923, so not very long. And they say that he couldn't sleep after Nan died. He claimed that she was haunting him. They said that there was one room in the White House, especially that she haunted. He had it sealed. He had it cleaned out. They'd never found anything or anything suspicious. He died in his sleep. Many people believe his wife murdered him. There was a claim that he talked in his sleep and confessed everything, and so she decided that she would just get rid of him. So she started poisoning him slowly, and he died. That was the rumor. So when they exhumed his body in the early 2000s, so obviously way after all of these people are alive, they exhume his body to check for poison. And so when they do that, they do find some poison, but this is the thing from the 1920s. It was very common that a lot of like your tonics, not that nasty one, but a lot of tonics and stuff had some poison, and it was not an unusual amount. So they cleared his wife's name. I can't think of her name right now. I knew it a few minutes ago. And so they do not think that his wife actually poisoned him, but they do a DNA test to see if his daughter was his daughter, as people claimed, and she was, but she had already died as well. So it really doesn't make a difference for his daughter, unfortunately. So that is story number 2. Sorry, that one's a little shady. But yeah, so Warren G. Harding, not a great president. He had a lot of scandals. He was not a good husband, and so, yeah. All right, then we have story number 3. This one is John Glenn sees firefly aliens. This story is really funny, so I hope you enjoy it. So John Glenn is an American hero. Hopefully you guys have heard of his name before. He's an astronaut. He's the first to orbit the Earth, and this was in 1962. He's not the first man ever to orbit the Earth. He's the first American. I should have cleared that. After he does all of this stuff with NASA, he actually is a senator for 25 years for Ohio. But that's just a little extra information about him. So he is selected as one of the Mercury 7s, and he is put into the first space flight program, and he is going to go into space, and he actually is going to be the only person on the spacecraft. And they launch him into orbit. He goes 3 times around the Earth. That's it. And it was called the Friendship 7, and he's the only one guy. I thought it was kind of funny. He was talking about, like, the guy who does the podcast, how, like, there weren't 7 friends on this, it was just him. And he's just up there for, like, 5 hours, and then he comes back. So, kind of simple. When he goes around the first, everything's normal, but then when he goes around the second time, this is the weirdest story. I'm sorry. His spaceship is surrounded by tiny glowing lights. And he calls down and says, hey, there's these lights. They're really bright, and he doesn't know what they are. They're just kind of surrounding the space shuttle. And NASA actually panics a little bit because they don't know what they are. They don't know if they're going to affect his ability to come back. And that's just on his second time. So on his third time he goes around, they don't follow him as he moves, and he goes the third time and nothing comes of it. And so he successfully lands, and when he lands, they decide to investigate what in the world was he seeing. So, this is a weird story, I'm telling you. Okay, so the spaceship actually had a vent, and what it does is if John Glenn had to go to the bathroom, number 1, it would actually project it out into space so it wasn't left in the spacecraft. So when that happens, it went out into outer space, and it froze and became, because it's so cold in space, it froze and became like pee crystals. And so what he was actually seeing was these crystals from his pee. This is weird. I'm sorry. And it was the light of the sun refracting off of it. And so it was just the light of the sun, and those crystals just kind of perfectly worked. John Glenn totally believed that story, and it seemed plausible. I mean, it kind of makes sense. And so they closed the case. No questions were ever asked about it again. They just went with that's what it was, and it kind of makes sense. So I don't blame him for going with that. And so that is what happened. He just saw crystals, and it wasn't aliens. So that is story number 3. All right, so here we go. We're going to go back. Story number 1 is Rhode Island creates vampire medicine. Ooh. Story number 2, Warren G. Harding's ghost. And story number 3, John Glenn sees firefly aliens. All right, so I'm going to tell you first of all, I'm going to give you a second. I almost told you. So you decide what you think. I debated and I was wrong. So that's all I'm going to say. All right, so story number 3. John Glenn sees firefly aliens. Absolutely true. He did see that. That did happen. Sorry, my hair's a little nutty today. And he did see firefly aliens. And so that story is absolutely true. 100%. So there you go. All right. So we are between Rhode Island creates vampire medicine and story number 2, Warren G. Harding's ghost. So story number 1 with the vampire medicine, absolutely true. poor Edwin really had to drink the nastiness. I feel really bad for him. That's so gross. Ugh. It gives me the heebie-jeebies still even think about it. So probably none of you are like, ew, disgusting. It's just me. But yeah, I have the weak stomach that I was warning you about. All right, so story number 2, Warren G. Harding's ghost. Let me tell you what parts of it are true and what parts are false. There's a lot false. So yes, Warren G. Harding did cheat on his wife, and they did give money to keep them quiet. Nan Britton was a real person. She did have a daughter, but Nan Britton did not die of polio, so she raised the daughter, and so the part that was the lie was that his daughter got put in an orphanage and then was adopted and stuff like that. They do exhume his body later to check for poison, and they do a DNA test, and it is his daughter. So a lot of it is true, but there's a lot that's a lie in the middle. You know, he didn't die from a ghost haunting him. He died supposedly of a heart attack. They're not 100% sure, but that's what they assume, and so that is why that story is false. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed these stories. There will be more this summer. I'm not going to do videos on them, but you can go and watch them if you want, because they're so much fun. I love listening to them. Every Monday is when they come out. So just check in, you know, maybe end of June and see if they have any new ones. If you enjoy them, because they are a lot of fun. They're usually about 35 minutes. They're not too bad. I listen to them either when I'm at home doing dishes or if I have to go somewhere in the car. It's just kind of fun. And so, yeah. So I hope you enjoyed our history or his story. I also hope you guys have the best summer. And yeah, I'm still around if you guys have questions or need something. I'm not going to answer, obviously, emails as quickly because it is summer, but I will be around all summer. So if you need something, you know, just check in, let me know. I'll be praying for you all this summer, and I hope to see you all back in my classroom in the fall, because that would be the best. So, yeah, have a great summer, guys, and I will see you all soon.